Welcome back to Heavy Metallurgy, everyone. Today I am reviewing a double dose of Doom featuring longtime veterans Paradise Lost and up-and-coming band from Los Angeles, California, Faetooth, and their unique fairy doom style. So, Paradise Lost have returned for their 17th full-length album. You heard that right. This is album number 17. It is entitled Ascension, and it releases on September 19th via Nuclear Blast Records. Now, Paradise Lost, of course, have had, lots of twists and turns throughout their career, starting out as one of the Peaceful Three, kind of helping pioneer that unique death doom style. They went into much more electronic directions for a while. They've returned to heavier music, and over the past several years, they've released some extremely solid albums. A lot of people have kind of heralded recent releases as, a return to their old sound, but there is no gothic part two in their catalog. Paradise Lost is, not a band to really go too far backwards, and instead, keep working on new sounds and new ideas. And the past few albums have been very successful for them. So how does Ascension measure up? Well, right away, the gang is all back together. Paradise Lost has had an incredibly consistent lineup going all the way back to their earliest days. Except the drummer, of course. They've gone through more drummers than Spinal Tap, but everybody else is still intact for yet another outing. The album sounds absolutely great, a good production job. It's not too over the top, it's not too raw or rough around the edges. It helps emphasize the heaviness of the music while keeping things clean and clear, but not to the point of sounding polished or sterile. So it fits the mood and tone of the music quite well. Overall, Ascension seems to be sort of combining elements that Paradise Lost have used on some of their recent albums. The past few albums have had slightly different identities from each other. For example, Medusa was a particularly slow, doom-laden album, whereas Obsidian had more brightness to it, a little more variety and a little more energy. And it feels like on Ascension they're sort of mixing it all together, taking the best elements from lots of different releases and successfully stitching them together for the most part. We hear what's in store right off the bat with the opening track Serpent on the Cross, which is one of the stronger and also one of the more aggressive tracks on the album. The blood and tragedy, all God's creations, all willing. So yes, as you can hear there, Nick Holmes is definitely at home using those deeper growled vocals, which he's returned to in recent years. Still sounds very good doing them. They're always heavy, but also clear, so it's a nice combination of ferocity but clarity. So yeah, we've got a great lead-off track, and after this, the band changes gears a bit for Tyrant's Serenade. This one features more of their sort of what I think of as a clean, gothic-tinged vocal style, which they have used quite a bit over the years.
Another winter again, forlorn as memories torment.
So yeah, this song works quite well, and it's definitely part of Paradise Lost's long-term repertoire to do songs in this particular idiom. I will say that it's not necessarily my favorite mode of Paradise Lost. While they're good at it, I feel like the songs that rely heavily on these cleaner vocals can sometimes either feel a bit too repetitive, or they simply go back to the chorus refrain a few too many times, which might be the reason that the songs end up feeling a bit repetitive. So Tyrant Serenade is not bad. It leads into the third track, Salvation, which shows off yet another facet of the band, where they can have a little bit of that, like 90s era Metallica thrash growl, I wouldn't be the first person to say that Nick Holmes is capable of, sounding more than a bit like James Hetfield.
For the founding endeavor, what you favors belongs innate. For the crown.
So yes, across these first three tracks, we see that the band is pulling out a lot of tricks. They're not going to make this album stick to one lane and only focus on one of their particular styles. They're going to use all the different vocal inflections that have been present on past albums, and they're going to mix it up here and there with different combinations in different songs. This works pretty well in terms of avoiding any kind of monotony from settling in. Each song is going to be a little bit different from the one before it and the one after it. When we get into the middle of the album, though, we do run into a little bit of a problem because you do have a few songs closer together that rely a bit more on the cleaner vocals. And again, you run into this problem where these songs tend to lean on the chorus quite a bit. You get this, for example, on a track like Savage Days, where within the first minute or so of the song, they're already using the main lines and melody of the chorus. The song hasn't even really gotten into full gear yet, and you've already heard it once, and you're going to hear it a few more times before that song runs out. And so again, these are the tracks where I tend to find myself zoning out a little bit, because it's not like the songs are complicated, and when you hear the chorus that many times, your brain figures out what to expect pretty quickly. So it's not that the songs are bad in any way, it's just that they're not the most interesting fare either. And this also happens on other tracks here towards the middle of the album, such as Lay a Wreath Upon the World and Silence Like the Grave. Now, the track in the middle of the album that does shine through is called Diluvium. This one goes with a little bit more of the aggressive mode towards the middle of the song. It starts out slow and pretty heavy, one of their more doomy numbers, but after the first couple of minutes, it starts to ramp up, relatively speaking, for a Paradise Lost song. But what really makes the song stand out is that within the chorus itself, there are spaces for these quick, short guitar lead bursts that really grab your attention and help the song stand out quite a bit. Provides a good kick of energy and livens things up in a part of the album that, has gotten a little bit tedious.
Reaching on holy waters, take me. A promised enemy.
So yes, I really like this track in the middle of the album to help break things up a little bit. And hearing those guitar parts in the chorus of this song kind of makes you realize how relatively little Paradise Lost relies on that kind of, big flashy guitar moment. But when they do, it can actually work to really, really good effect. As we get into, the last few tracks of the album, there are still some good songs here, such as Deceivers, which sticks a little bit more to, again, their slightly aggressive, 90s Metallica inflected type of sound, although it is a relatively short track at about 3.5 minutes. The big moment, they do save one of the best for last, with Closer the Precipice. Right off the bat, this song establishes that it's going to have a more bombastic, but also leaden type of sound, with the piano heralding the first few notes, but accompanied by a very, very heavy riff. So yes, On the Precipice is a slightly longer song, but it feels like all the elements really come together. The stars align here, and you get this perfect blend of some of their slower moments. The cleaner vocals are not repeated too much. The heavier vocals are placed perfectly. The piano's presence and that big, heavy riff are always kind of lurking there in the background, keeping the song well grounded. And yeah, it's a great number to go out on. So, at the end of the album, what's the verdict on Ascension? Well, it definitely has its highlights, and there's nothing wrong with the album. There's no major flub-ups. The band hasn't strayed off into some completely new, uncharted territory that's going to throw a lot of fans for a loop. But I do think like the middle of the album suffers a bit. Maybe there's one or two tracks too many. Maybe the total runtime is just a little high. This album clocks in at about, let's see, yeah, 52 minutes. So it's pushing towards an hour. Uh, and maybe there's not quite enough strong highlights within these 52 minutes to make me feel this is one of the really standout Paradise Lost albums from recent years. That's not to say it's a bad album. They've been putting out some pretty good bangers in the past decade, so the competition, even in their own catalog, is pretty fierce. And while I do like several of the songs on Ascension, as a whole, I don't think it's an album that's going to get massive amounts of play. It's more likely to be a situation where some of these tracks get revisited, maybe put into a Paradise Lost playlist, but I can see myself skipping through some of the tracks in the middle. So, a good album. I think if you're a longtime Paradise Lost fan, you'll be happy with what you're hearing. You're not going to hear anything that you haven't heard before. And there may be some moments along the way that get a little too tedious. Um, might have you reaching for that skip button. All right, now our call to arms is for the new Faetooth album. This is titled Labyrinthine, and it came out on September 5th on the Flenser label. We didn't get a promo for this album, so I haven't had much time with it. I bought it September 5th like everyone else did. So I've only played this one a couple of times. Nevertheless, I think it's worth highlighting here. In fact, I highlighted it as a call to arms in my most recent video for the newest Autrest album. But at that point, I hadn't heard it. I just kind of gave it a shout out that it was going to get released. Well, now it has been released, and I've listened to it, and I'm happy to report that it is an absolute monster of an album. Faetooth caught a lot of people's attention with their 2022 debut, Remnants of the Vessel. They, stirred up some hype with TikTok videos showcasing this, absolutely killer guitar tone. Since then, one of the guitarists has left, reducing Faetooth to a three-piece lineup. And that was a concern I had. It's like, will they be able to sort of recapture that sound with one fewer member? I was really happy to see, however, that they have the same production crew. Joe Cayero is once again producing this album, just like he did for Remnants of the Vessel. And the sound, once again, is absolutely fantastic. So big props to Joe Cayero for, really knowing how to get a great sound translated into, digital medium for this really awesome band. The first few tracks on Labyrinthine really focus on the doomier, heavier, and darker side of their sound. You can hear this on a track like It Washes Over. So yes, it doesn't take long to establish on this album that they once again have an absolutely great guitar tone, monstrously heavy, but also just raw enough to have that kind of, uneasy, rusty blade kind of feeling, helping it slice through the music. The rest of the band's music, they have the kind of cool tag of fairy doom because they're trying to balance two very different aspects. There is a lighter, more ethereal, I suppose you would describe it as like a post-punk or shoegaze kind of sound, with these very ephemeral and very beautiful female vocals. But then they also, yes, have this, very crushingly heavy doom sludge metal combination. Now, to my ears, with just a couple of listens under my belt, it does feel like this album leans a little bit more on the doom side of heaviness and maybe a little bit less on the sludgy side compared to the debut album. Maybe that's a difference again in the lineup. Maybe it's just a slight change in songwriting direction, and maybe the sludge elements just haven't impressed themselves upon me just yet. Regardless, the sound is devastatingly heavy. And it remains so across several of these opening tracks. All of them, Iron Gate, Death of Decay, Hole, White Noise, they are really slowly hammering your soul into the ground with these crushingly, just devastatingly heavy riffs. But it's not just the riffage and the tone that's making these songs really weigh down upon you. Their secret weapon is their harsh vocal style. It's this really just despondent, shrieked, blackened voice, and they use it very sparingly. They don't overdo it at all. They really pick their moments in all of these songs, but when it is used, it hits with maximum effect and is just absolutely gutting. And when you combine it with the lyrics, which have a dreamy poetry to them, a little hard to interpret, but clearly in many cases a sad and despondent tone to them, and having these extra layer of vocals that are just inhumanly harrowing, combined with the more sedate and pretty female vocals and this crushingly heavy music, it is something that will take an emotional toll on you. And they really lean into it on the first half of this album. When you get to the middle of the album with a track such as Eviscerate, it feels like they start to subtly shift gears. They have really just squashed you down into this, pit of pitch black darkness. Now they're going to let you slowly ascend out of it. Because again, Faetooth is about a balance. It's not all supposed to be dark and negative. And so with tracks like Eviscerate and especially the amazing October, they kind of, lay off that a little bit and allow those more, post-punk kind of jangly moments to shine. The songs become a little more expansive. There's more room to breathe. The same overall bleak and gray atmosphere is present. In terms of just the overall atmosphere of the album, it reminds me a lot of something like Brave Murder Day or, Discouraged Ones era Catatonia, where there's just this real bleak, surrender to whatever dark, inevitable fate awaits you. But here it's delivered again with more space, more room to breathe, and it's extremely effective. I'm glad the band showcases this side of their album across several tracks to give you some time to recover from the crushingly heavy first several tracks. So yes, on first impression, Labyrinthine feels like a tale of two sides to some extent, with the first half being the heavier and darker material, and the second half being, the slightly lighter, more, again, jangly shoegaze, post-punk. Pick whichever one makes the most sense to you. I think we all kind of know what those terms are implying. But it highlights that side of the band extremely well through the later tracks on the album. And I think this track sequencing works really well. It kind of follows a hero's journey type of path where you have to descend, through the darkness and come out the other side before you can kind of look back and see the entire expanse of what you have traversed with this album. 2025 has had some extremely good albums come out, especially earlier this year. And now we're starting to see some, really strong stuff come out here in the fall as well. This Faetooth album should be considered among contenders for the best album of this year. If it weren't for the Have a Crew New album blowing me away so much back at the start of 2025, I could foresee this Faetooth album being at the top of my list come the end of the year. So it may run an extremely strong second to Have a Crew New. It really is that good. And I'm really glad to see the band come back, deliver an excellent second album, and I wish the best for them. They're very talented. They've got, the lyrical poetry is amazing, the sound is amazing, and they're combining these elements and making it into their own sound. They're not just grafting a couple of different things together or with a random mishmash. They really do have a unique take on the Doom genre. If you were going to buy only one album in the month of September, I'd strongly encourage you to make it Faetooth's Labyrinthine. If you are a fan of things that are heavy, dark, and beautiful in a very unique way, this album will not disappoint. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this double dose of Doom review. Please check out other content on Heavy Metallurgy, trying to get reviews up, at least once a week or so as things come out that catch our ear, catch our attention, and that we think, well, folks might enjoy knowing something about so they can decide how best to spend their music dollars. Check out the live streams and album club videos as well. And until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head.